Slanjava, agus féilte go Chariots of the Gods, Chapter 3.
It's a fucking intro. It's a fucking intro. I'm doing this temporarily until I hear some new intro scene. It's a fucking intro. It's a fucking intro. It's a fucking intro. Now on with the main show.
So hello folks, how you doing? So this will be the long awaited next chapter of Chasing Chariots of the Gods. There's going to be a few things different about this for this chapter, because there's so much bullshit in the chapter. There's a fair amount to go through. So this video will have jump, a script, cuts, which is something I invariably don't do, and a few other things. So where do I begin? Well, this chapter is called The Improbable World of the Unexplained. Yep, in this, Erich goes on to put through his working hypothesis for the evidences that come from it. And the first piece of evidence he comes to is Piri Reis. The admiral from the Ottoman Empire back in the 1500s. So Piri Reis, like I said, was an admiral and a cartographer from the Ottoman Empire in the early 16th century. Why is he relevant? Well, von Daniken uses him to back up his thesis on ancient aliens, as he claims that two maps were found in the early 18th century. In his book he states that the maps are absolutely accurate and depicted the coast of South America, North America and the Antarctic. Also the maps were the Med and the coast of Africa. Now, along with his fabulous claim, he states that studies by a professor called Charles Hapgood gave us shattering information that the maps were copied from aerial photographs. And then he goes on to explain how it could have happened. A spaceship flies over land, pointing its camera downwards, taking photos, and then he asks what we should do with this info. Whether we should be satisfied with the legend that a god given to a high priest, or should we take no notice and poo-poo the story and ignore the evidence. His argument here is arguing from ignorance in a way. We don't know how the maps got to be as good as they are, but they're not accurate. There's also the point of, where did the story that the god gave him to a high priest come from? I'll tell you where. It came from Erich. I've never heard it mentioned anywhere else when it comes to the Piri Reis maps. Well, like I said, there are some problems with the claim, and a series of questions that von Daniken asks. And a series of questions, sorry. First and foremost, is maps of Piri Reis are actually only the one map that we know of. They do manage to place South America and Africa in the right position in relation to each other, latitude, longitude wise. I'm reading off the script here, so it's going to be bitty, I'm afraid. And it's probably the first map to do that, as in relation to where South America and Africa are in the globe. However, this map also includes Antarctica as an extension of South America. And when it was studied closer, it was found that the coast of Antarctica is actually just a redrawing of the South American coast. It has all the inlets that, if you match them up, they match up. So really it's just a copy and paste job of the South American coastline. Cuba was positioned as if it was Japan, which was common in the early 16th century. As a popular TV detective was often wont to say, just one more thing, sir. Terrible Columbo impression, but there we go. The period ice maps also happen to include the mythical island of Antilles. What's Antilles, I hear you say? Well, like I said, it's a mythical island. That 7 priests with 7 flocks fled west from Spain, founding 7 cities in the island of Antilles. It was slowly phased out in maps in the later 16th century. As more travel between the New World and the Old World happened, and the island couldn't be found. Absolutely accurate map of this, my arse. Now you're wondering, how could this mythical island be? Well, you see, like I said, it was 7 priests from the 7 flocks fleeing Spain when the Moors invaded. That was the story, and it was accepted, despite having no evidence whatsoever for such an island existing. And it was accepted until the later 16th century, like I say. So how you could claim that this map was absolutely accurate, I don't know. It's not that he's questioning it, because a lot of people write off the stuff as saying, but he's just asking questions, he's not claiming. But he did claim this one, that it was an absolutely accurate map. So that's one claim out the window already. So what's next from there? Well, that's simple. The Nazca lines. Oh boy, does it always come down to the Nazca lines at some point, doesn't it just? Well, let's see what von Daniken has for us. Well, first he describes the Nazca Plateau as dry and arid with rocks that look like rusty iron. He also mentions that if you fly overhead then you'll spot the giant geoglyphs in the area. Now we get to the meat of his bollocks. He states that the archaeologists are saying that Nazca lines are Incan roads. He claims this is a preposterous idea and asks what use Incans would have for straight roads that intersect in a plain that suddenly stop. Putting aside the fact that I can't find a record of there's ever been an except theory in archaeology due to archaeologists knowing that the Nazca Empire finished some 400 years before the Incan Empire, and that the geoglyphs are dated to the end of the I was going to say Nincan Empire there. Well, Erich von Daniken is a nincompoop, I meant the Nazca Empire even. The ancient Romans had figured out straight roads were faster than curvy roads long before the Incans came around. Straight roads are pretty damned useful. And I'm pretty sure the Incans could have figured out as well, with that thing so needed by knowledge, observation. Anyway, back to the book. He does mention that Nazca pottery and ceramics have been found in the area, but he doesn't mention that these ceramics have the same designs as those found by the geoglyphs, like the giant monkey, the spider, whatever, hummingbird, that such thing. So he dismisses this as the likeliest evidence attributing the geoglyphs to Nazca peoples, as he thinks it's oversimplifying the situation. So much for Occam's razor, folks, eh? Well, he then states that no serious excavations have been carried out until 1952, and that there's no date for the lines. He also states that this is only now, which means by 1968 by the way, that the lines have been fully measured, thus confirming my hypothesis that the lines were laid out for astronomical reasons. He also states that a Peruvian specialist of the time attributes some religious purpose to alignments, and even possibly a calendar. He's got this obsession with calendars, which you'll see in a minute. He then states that, seen from the air, the only conclusion he could draw is that this is clearly an airfield. He then asks what is so far-fetched about the idea. Well, if Eric were alive, I would tell him the most far-fetched thing about this is there's no evidence. That's it. There's no evidence for any of the ancient aircraft in the area, or even the paraphernalia required for fueled flight. You know, like fuel pumps. Oh, and von Daniken, the astronomical hypothesis was dismissed in the 90s. I know that this is after the book is published, but Eric never corrected any of the later prints of Chariots of the Gods, or any of his books when shown to be wrong. He just left them as they were. So he never retracted any statements when cut out to be lying about the evidence within the books. And people still argue that this book is evidence of ancient aliens to this day. And a lot of the people arguing for ancient aliens, like George Crazy Hair, Mustafalopoulos, or whatever his name actually is, are just rehashing this book in their own words. You know, like Shocky God does to William Lane Craig. Anyway, where was I in my script? I went off the script there. So, he then states that classical archaeology can't believe that ancient, pre-Incan peoples could have perfect surveying tools, which isn't quite true, as it is archaeology from the very archaeologists he's trying to install doubt about throughout this book that use simple surveying techniques available from that time to show how it could be done, and how they've even made their own geoglyphs using these techniques. And simple tools were used to make the lines. Of course, using the technique. Indeed, wooden stakes have been found that back up the hypothesis that surveying techniques and simple tools were used to make the lines. Of course, this is a ridiculous statement from von Daniken to make you doubt that archaeological understanding and doubt any archaeological understanding. And to insert his idea as the prevailing one as shown in the next line following the survey line in the book. And I quote, including the bad spelling, but I think that's more a editing problem with my version, which is a first edition of the book, so it wasn't caught when it went to print. And for that of aircraft could have existed in antiquity is sheer humbug to it. That was the line. Basically he's stating that the idea that ancient aircraft is just such sheer humbug to archaeologists and scholars that they instantly dismiss it, and that's a bad thing. And he then goes on to state that his way of thinking on how they were drawn, using coordinates given by ancient aliens in their aircraft. He then goes on to state that it isn't yet possible to say that it was ever used as an airfield with certainty, but he sure as fuck claims it. There's a photos in this later on in the book of some of the stuff that he claims are evidences in this chapter. One of the ones is he shows the Nazca lines. He takes a picture of one that is actually just the corner of one of the main geoglyphs, like the monkey, claiming that this could be used as a airfield, but he doesn't show the entire geoglyph, so he only shows a part that looks like it could be, the straight part. Ah dear, disingenuous all the way. So he goes on to start talking about how iron tools, if used, wouldn't be found due to metal rusting. He seems to forget here that the Nazca Desert is an arid place lacking in a lot of water required for rust. You know, three things generally needed for rust: oxygen, iron, and water. He then asks what's wrong with thinking that the lines were laid out for the gods, stating land here. Well, the problem here is that Erich isn't arguing that they're for religious purposes, but for an actual airfield, for which he has of course no evidence. More and more lines are being found every couple of years, yet nothing that shows the desert has ever been found that shows it as a landing strip. I'm sure the ancient aliens used giant monkeys and hummingbirds as landing strips all the time, and this is why they're found all over the world. Wait. So what's the next thing in his evidence-driven book that he has here? Well, the next thing would be the Paracas Candelabra, or the Paracas Trident as it's also called. This is, thankfully, a rather short piece by Erich. He now goes on to talk about what is known as the Paracas Candelabra, like I said. However, first he posits a question, stating that the huge geoglyphs found in many parts of Peru are obviously signals for floating beings. What else could they be for? My answer is, I don't know. We don't know, Erich. How about religion? A sign of hero worship for a great warrior. These things have been used throughout centuries, for many reasons. However, back to what we were talking about, the mercifully short bit about Paracas. He then goes on to describe this wonderful piece of work, possibly done by the Paracas people around 200 BCE. He describes it as one of the most peculiar drawings carved into a mountain, and that if you approach by sea, you can see a figure nearly 820 feet high from 12 miles at sea. He then states that if you play with it, that looks like, then you'll state that it looks like a trident or a candelabra. He is correct in this. If it looks like a trident or a candelabra, though it's only 595 feet tall. However, he also states that a long rope was found in the centre column of the stone, asking if it could have been a pendulum in the past. Now, I can find nothing about there being a rope found in the centre column. However, looking at the candelabra like I have done, how the fuck could anyone use a carving as a pendulum at that gradient? I mean, it slopes. So if you've got something up here, your rope's going to come back down like that. It's not going to hang over it where you can swing it. And of course, if it's in the ground, you can't use it as a pendulum unless you're using the earth as a giant fucking conker. So he doesn't go on to explain what use this hypothetical pendulum could be used for. The local myths state that it represents the lightning rod or staff of the great god Viracocha, a very popular Incan god, or god that derived from the Incans. Well, I've seen some claim he's an Incan god, I've seen some just claim he's a South American god that was very popular at the time. Considering this is BCE, 200 BCE, I suspect that it's more likely that the Incans adopted Viracocha, and the name just comes from the Incans. So he's a very popular god among the South American peoples at the time. The thing goes on to state that we must admit that we are groping in the dark when we're trying to explain these things, but again, this is a paragraph, which is just an excuse to instill a distrust into scholars and what archaeology states. The next paragraph he asks what could have induced the pre-Incan peoples to do such things, what madness. I don't know, Eric, but what possible madness could have caused people in North America to carve 4 faces into the side of a mountain, and indeed carve another face into a mountain to honour the Native American peoples when they have no photograph of a certain general, nor do the Native American peoples find it very well done and good taste. Because, well, it's never been completed yet, it's still been working, it's been on the go for 40 years, this thing, and I think they're doing it on a religious mountain, which is not good. If I could remember the name of the general it's being done for, I think it's Sitting Bull. They're doing it for the great chief Sitting Bull, I'm not sure. But what could produce such madness for this? We don't know, Eric. Could it be hero worship? Could it be religious reasons? Who the fuck knows? But we've got modern examples, like the 4 presidents at Mount Rushmore, to show us that it's very obvious how it can be done. So what could have induced these pre-Incans to do such a thing? What madness? Then he comes to the usual claims from people about these monuments, that they would have taken decades without modern tools, something that the ancients didn't have, so how could they have made these? However, Eric adds something into the mix. Why did they do all this if they didn't have the knowledge of flying beings? Of course, we have had knowledge of flying beings. I mean, we only have to look up and they go chirp chirp in some cases. This argument from incredulity is a big fat lie, and I'll be showing examples of this later on. Also, Eric's flying being is an argument from ignorance, and there's a whole lot of that. And then we go into the 2 paragraphs of scientists and archaeologists bashing to try and get you to take his side and cast doubt into the word of those who have spent their lives studying such things. However, in these 2 paragraphs he manages to get another bullshit claim in, one dealing with something that he calls the calendar of Tiahuanaca. He states that a calendar was found in Tiahuanaca that shows equinoxes, lunar positions for every hour, astronomical seasons, and movements of the moon. He goes on to state that if proof proves that in our arguments that we may not accept, that an ancient people may have had a higher culture than ours. Of course, if this calendar was found, it would have been hailed as one of the most amazing discoveries in archaeology, and all of us would have been taught about it in schools by now. This is not the case, and I'm about to tell you why. Now, the only thing I can find that references to a calendar is the Gateway of the Sun on Google search. Eric doesn't state what this calendar looks like. He doesn't take a picture. He managed to take a picture. He managed to include pictures of the Gateway of the Sun and the statue he talks later on. But never mind. So he states that this calendar has all this information. Though how Eric can say it has such information, I can't tell, as the people living in Tiahuanaca had no written language that we know of. It's not even the only gateway on site showing images of staffed gods. It's just the most impressive, possibly showing Viracocha. He asks if our self-assurance would accept such proof. Well, no. Simple as that. Because all we know is speculation. And nothing about that, nothing about what it states that it is a calendar. Then we get on to what he calls the Great Idol, a red sandstone statue that stands about 24 feet long and weighing 20 tons by Eric's measurements. The problem here is that Eric claims the statue is a contradiction in the superb quality of carvings on it and the poor quality of the architecture built to house it. Going by that, we can look at any statue made by a modern man and then say it's contradictory to the poor quality of the shacks that humans lived in, so no modern man could have made that statue. See my point here? There are several of these statues in the area as well. It's not just the one. So he then says that the old temple is called the Old Temple because of primitive workmanship in the building, which is blatantly not true. In fact, the only part of Tiahuanaca that I available to the public that could be considered the Old Temple is a semi-subterranean temple, and that's not that bad architecturally for the time. I mean, I particularly like the carved heads in the walls. Those are pretty damned awesome. I'd totally have them on my walls. Just sticking out carved head, gargoyle face things. Awesome. He then states that a couple of authors, H.S. Bellamy and P. Allen, have written extensively about how the pictoglyphs are full of extensive knowledge of astronomical means based on the round Earth. And that's where that pretty much goes. For those that don't know, H.S. Bellamy was a huge proponent of the now defunct cosmic ice theory. He often wrote books about things based on this defunct theory, including his stuff that he co-authored here with P. Allen on the age of Tiahuanaca and their astronomical significance. So anything postulated by them can be pretty much dismissed here, as Eric goes on to use their published work as evidence that Tiahuanaca had alien help, or possibly had alien help. He then goes on to posit that the city was miles from anywhere, 13,000 feet high, and that manual labour is torture for anyone who isn't native. Yet he's incredulous that an enormous city stood there. Of course, he discounts that the Tiahuanacans were masters at irrigation, which helped them build an empire with the empire crumbling as their irrigation techniques couldn't help them any longer, so they couldn't get the food to sustain a city locally. Or that the locals would have been local to the area, so manual labour wouldn't have been a bother for them. They'd have been growing up and evolved to that area. For like much of Peru, many Peruvians who live in the mountains have flatter noses and wider nostrils for a bit greater air intake, that sort of thing. So yeah, he ignores all that. He also then states that because there are no traditions hanging around it, for that we should be thankful, because now we can, look at things through his light, through a different light from northern archaeology. Be thankful that because now we can make any old shit up to fill in the gaps. Yay for the aliens of the gaps argument, eh? In the next part, he also talks about, makes an argument from ignorance when describing the blocks used for, building stuff. How heavy they are, how, we don't know how they did it, so it could only be done by superior technology, you know, having holes in them that are unexplained. So humans, basically, humans of that time and period couldn't have done anything of it without help. Then Erich talks about the gateway of the sun. So I guess in the end that wasn't the calendar that Erich was talking about, though I don't know. And he talks about the carved figurines upon it. Now brace yourself folks, Erich is going to blow your mind with a myth. According to Erich, myth and legend tells us that a golden ship came down to the people of Teotihuacan from the stars. And in that ship was a woman named Oriana, to fulfill the task of becoming the great mother of Earth. Oriana had 4 fingers, which were webbed. Oriana also gave birth to 70 Earth children, before fucking off again to the stars. Of course, the problem we have here is that there's no such legends at Teotihuacan, because, well, there's no written language to tell us. We haven't anything to decipher to know what the religious practices were. And as he states, there's no like leftover traditions in the area because quite simply it was abandoned when the empire finally fell. So yeah, of course another problem is that this is fairly reminiscent to a story from the Dead Sea Scrolls, so I think this is where Erich lifted this story from. In the Dead Sea Scrolls version of the Masoretic texts, it suggests that there were in fact 70 sons of the Most High God, sent to rule over the 70 nations of Earth. The idea of 70 nations of Earth, each ruled over by one of the Elohim, or sons of God, is also found in the Ugaritic texts. So again, I don't know where Erich is getting this, but I suspect he's lifting it from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And faffing it up a bit just for, you know, his book. Apparently we find 4-fingered people in carvings at Teotihuacan, and no one from any age we know of ever saw Teotihuacan when it wasn't in ruins. Except for the people ruled by it in the empire and the townsfolk of the area. You know, also looters just after the fall of Teotihuacan. Those people we can ignore. Right, Erich? Well, not to turn from that, Erich now goes on to state that there are many mysteries and archaeologists. Many mysteries and archaeologists are fools, you hear me? Fools! To claim that the site is at least 3,000 years old, based on evidence like clay figurines found on site. Nope, way too idiotic. Best to base the age of fluff and books written on the site, and a book written about the site based on a now defunct scientific theory. Yeah, better than evidence.